WNYC, the municipal radio broadcasting station of the city of New York, operated by the Department of Planning and Structures under the supervision of Commissioner Albert Goldman, broadcasting in a wavelength of 526 meters, or equivalent to 570 kilocycles, and by authority of the Federal Radio Commission. Roland Weber announcing, wishing you good evening, giving you the correct sound to the courtesy of Western Union. At the stroke of the gong will be precisely 1.5 minutes past 6 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time. To the courtesy of the Police Department of the City of New York, we give you their daily weather report from their Air Service Division located at North Beach, Long Island. Late this afternoon, the remarks were clear weather, unlimited ceiling, unlimited visibility. A wind blowing 18 miles per hour from the northwest, a temperature of 38 degrees, which means freezing before night probably, and the barometer reading 44.0. WNYC in New York. Herman Newman, concert pianist and the musical director of WNYC, gives us this evening's prelude after the piano. The prelude to this evening's program, played by Herman Newman, concert pianist at WNYC. We ask you to stand by for just a moment. The next broadcast will be brought to you from the Board of Education building in Brooklyn, announced by Thomas H. Cohen.
WNYC, the municipal broadcasting station of the City of New York, operated by the Department of Plant and Structures under the supervision of Commissioner Albert Goldman, on a frequency of 570 kilocycles by authority of the Federal Radio Commission. Good evening from the Board of Education building in Brooklyn on Livingston Street. It is again our privilege It is again our privilege to present another one of the instructive presentations by the Board of Education under the direction of Mr. Frank Rexford, Director of Civics. Mr. Rexford.
We're here tonight to carry out a little more of Dr. O'Shea's program, the idea of giving the public an idea of what we're doing in the schools. We're doing this for pupils, for teachers, and for parents. Last week we had a letter from a parent saying that nothing had helped her so much in helping her children get their lessons as to know what we wanted them to do as they got from the lesson which was given 2 weeks ago. Tonight we're all set. We have a fine orchestra here. We have a fine speaker. I have a beautiful little class here with red neckties and all smiles. And we're going to open the program with selections from the John Adams High School Orchestra under the direction of Mr. H. Otto Piatti. The orchestra will now play Overture Stradella in Flauto.
Appreciate that. The next number on our program is one of our talks on teaching. This is the modern teaching of arithmetic in our schools by Mr. Morris Garfinkel, principal of Junior High School 210, Brooklyn. Mr. Garfinkel. The differences between the modern teaching of arithmetic in our schools and the teaching that was done 30 or 40 years ago are many and varied. To get a fair picture of these changes that have taken place and the progress that has been made, we will consider these changes under three heads. The changes that have taken place as to aim, that is, why we teach arithmetic today. The changes that have taken place in the content, that is, what we teach in arithmetic today. And the changes that have taken place in the teaching procedure itself, or how we teach arithmetic today. The why of the problem is perhaps the most important, because it is our aim in the teaching of arithmetic and the objectives we make our goal that will determine what we shall teach and how we shall teach it. Arithmetic has held an important place in schoolwork through the ages, but the objectives have differed. At one time, arithmetic was taught solely because of its values in actual use. At another, mainly because of its cultural values. And more recently, up to about 1900, mainly because of its disciplinary value, that is, as a means of developing such mental abilities as reasoning and judgment. The influence of this last aim has been very profound, and some of its effects are still with us. It was this aim that produced examples with impossible numbers, because as long as the examples were difficult, they were supposed to develop reasoning. To divide 2,576,834 by 973 is an illustration. It was this aim, too, that produced problems with impossible situations, possessing no values other than their supposed contribution to the development of an ability in reasoning. The well-known problem of the frog at the bottom of the well is an illustration of this type of problem. You know, the well was 15 feet deep, and the frog was trying to get out. Every time it jumped up 8 feet and fell back 3 feet. How many jumps did it take to get out? Of course, the catch was that on the third jump it would land clear of the well and would not fall back. This was supposed to be the proper diet for developing reasoning, but no thought was given to the remarkable frog that could jump 8 feet vertically. Our modern aim in the teaching of arithmetic is primarily twofold. That is, to equip the child with the abilities in computation that he will need in actual life situations in the home, in the commercial world, or in the industrial world. And at the same time, to give the child a true idea as to the quantitative phases of the world that surrounds him. We do not disregard altogether the cultural values in arithmetic, nor do we deny that ability in reasoning may be developed in the course of arithmetic teaching.
This closes the entertainment for this evening. We're very proud of these young people who came down here on short notice to give us this fine entertainment. We think that the arithmetic lesson was well worth listening to. Anybody can learn arithmetic from studying with these boys and girls. Next week, we're going to have another arithmetic lesson. Mr. Garfinkel is going to give us another talk on arithmetic. And we're going to take up the subject of insurance. That's something that everybody wants to know more about, and everybody is certainly interested in it. We hope that if you are learning anything from these programs, if we're doing anything for you as parents and for teachers and children, we hope that you'll let us know if the programs are not what you'd like to have them. We'd like to change them. I'm now turning the microphone back to Mr. Cowan, who will sign off for the night.
You've heard the fine musical program by the John Adams High School Orchestra, and I think it was a very interesting point that Mr. Rexford made. Another school orchestra found it unable to come to the Board of Education building in Livingston Street, Brooklyn this evening, but there was no embarrassment. If anything, an embarrassment of riches. Another orchestra from another school just came. That gives you some idea of the musical culture that is being brought forward in the high schools of the city of New York. These are all youngsters that play in these orchestras, and we feel very proud indeed to broadcast their efforts. Including another of the interesting educational programs from the Board of Education building in Brooklyn, under the direction of Mr. Frank Rexford, one of the most modest men we have ever met in radio, who is the director of civics. He takes very little credit to himself, but we feel assured that you realize the amount of work that is involved in these programs. We turn back now to the studios. Kindly stand by for their announcement.
Continuing our program at WNYC, we present to you a program under the auspices of the Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee. Guest artists on the program this evening are the Musical Pastels Trio, Esther Jaffe, cellist, Mary Genovese, violinist, Mildred Feldman, pianist, Anita Novi, accordionist, and Claude Angelo, soprano. The Musical Pastels Trio opens the program with a Hungarian serenade, Serenade Hongroise, of WNYC. Hungarian serenade, Serenade Hongroise of WNYC, played by the Musical Pastels Trio at WNYC. The first soloist on the program this evening is Nita Novi, accordionist, playing a composition of Carlo Magnante, Accordiana. Anita Norby, accordionist on the program of the Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee. The total subscriptions to the $18 million Emergency Unemployment Relief Fund is secured through the efforts of the army of 18,000 workers in the block-to-block canvass under the leadership of Governor Alfred E. Smith, will be reported at a luncheon Wednesday in the Hotel Astor. Governor Smith will preside after the luncheon meeting. Reports on subscriptions will be received from all the territorial commanders in each of the boroughs engaged in raising funds to relieve the jobless. The musical pastel trio, Esther Jaffe, Mary Genovese, and Mildred Feldman, return to play for you a trio arrangement of a song of Pergolesi, written almost 200 years ago, Tre giorni son che Nina. 3 days have passed since Nina died. The musical pastoral trio at WNYC, playing on the Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee. We introduce another soloist on our program, Clara D'Angelo, lyric soprano, singing with Mr. Newman at the piano, Mrs. H.H.A. Beecher's song, All Love But a Day. WNYC in New York, a tango Prospero of Pasquale Tarasco, played by Anita Norby, accordionist at WNYC. We present again the musical pastel trio, Esther Jaffe, cellist, Mary Genovese, violin, and Mildred Feldman, pianist, playing the second of the Spanish dances of Mostovsky. second of the Spanish dances of Maurice Moskowski, played by the musical pastel trio at WNYC. Again, we introduced our soloist on this Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee program, Clara D'Angelo, lyric soprano, singing one of the songs of Paolo Toschi, L'ultimo bacio, the last kiss. WNYC in New York, the musical pastel trio, Mary Genovese, violin, Esther Jaffe, cello, Mrs. Feldman, piano, completing the program under the auspices of the Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee and WNYC in New York. Remember that this Unemployment Relief Committee is asking you to share in the great work of raising an $18 million fund for the relief of the unemployed. Governor Smith has said every volunteer worker in the block-to-block canvass must put forth his utmost effort to induce wage earners to share with the jobless if the $18 million fund for unemployment relief is to be reached during the coming week. Do your part, if you have not already done it, remembering the great human motto of the Emergency Unemployment Relief Committee, I will share. WNYC in New York, John Cuff will give you the correct time, followed by police alarms and the civic information of the evening.
Eastern Standard Time, through the courtesy of Western Union, at the stroke of the gong will be 7:32. We continue the reporting a list of missing persons. The list was compiled by the Missing Persons Bureau, Police Headquarters, New York City. Missing since November 29th, Christina Marshall, 349 53rd Street, Brooklyn. 17 years, 5 feet 3, 117 pounds. Brown eyes, brown hair, dark complexion.
This little idiom of speech implies that we have started something flowing through the copper wires that lead to our lights. Very much as the turn of a faucet will let flow a stream of water, save that in the wires flow this mysterious substance, electricity. Probably all of you would ascribe to electricity this liquid property of flow. And when the electric lamp lights up, realize that somehow this electric flow has heated the wires in your lamp, pressure difference could mean when these things are constantly changing. A flow of AC is considered the same as that of a direct current when both will heat a lamp to the same brilliance. In the same way, an effective value for an alternating pressure difference might be compared to a steady or DC pressure difference. The different effects that may be obtained with straight wires, coiled wires, and condensers when AC and DC are sent through them is brought out very graphically in a series of exhibits at the Museum of Science and Industry at 220 East 42nd Street. I think you will find that a visit to the museum will make clearer many of the principles and devices about which we talk over the radio. There is one other factor controlling the flow of alternating current through wires that we should also mention: the rapidity with which the current is surging back and forth. All we can say here is that as the current fluctuates more rapidly, a wire having inductance offers more and more opposition to the flow of electricity, whereas the condenser offers less and less. These opposite effects are of great practical use in tuning your radio set, as we shall see later. This all sounds pretty much like theory, and you may wonder how we know how these invisible currents are behaving in these wires. There is a device, however, called an oscillograph that actually gives us a visible, instantaneous picture of these currents and lets us see that what we have been describing actually does take place. You will, I believe, see one of these oscillographs in operation at the Museum of Science and Industry. Granting, however, that the alternating currents do flow through wires and condensers in this way, what practical use may be made of these properties, you may ask? In the time that remains tonight, let me tell you of a few of the many, many applications.
Continues the program by playing for you a concert waltz of Rachel entre les nôtres. Gladys Walsh at WNYC played the concert waltz of Rachel entre les nôtres. In concluding her program at WNYC this evening, Miss Walsh plays for you MacDowell's tone poem, Soul of Sunset. WNYC in New York, in Gladys Walsh concert pianist, concluding her program with one of the sketches of Edward MacDowell, Cold at Sunset. We continue the program in presenting to you under the auspices of the Museum of Natural History, John R. Saunders of the educational staff of that museum, who this evening discusses the preservation and conservation of wildlife. Mr. Saunders.
Good evening. The world has suffered many losses throughout time, and some of these losses were unavoidable. However, in this age of enlightenment and knowledge, we have, by carelessness and lack of foresight, lost several things we cannot recover. Very difficult to find a parallel in history of the story of the extinction of the passenger pigeon or wild pigeon. The passenger pigeon, in some respects, was the finest pigeon this world has seen. Naturalists are prone to say that the extinction of this species has never been satisfactorily explained. But when once its history is known, the story of its extinction reads like an open book. The tremendous numbers of this pigeon, which was once believed to have been the most numerous bird in the world, caused no more wonder than did its sudden disappearance. The tales of its former abundance are well attested, and there are men living today who have seen the countless multitudes of these birds that once wandered over the land. Their abundance in the forest lands west of the Appalachian mountain chain during the 19th century is well known, but the vast numbers that roamed over the Atlantic seaboard during the early history of this country have been forgotten. Alexander Wilson, the father of American ornithology, tells of a breeding place of these birds in Kentucky about 1806, which was several miles in breadth and was said to be more than 40 miles in extent. More than 100 nests were found on a single tree. He also tells of a flight of these birds. As far as the eye could see in every direction, the sky was dark with birds. For 4 hours, the procession rolled overhead. He estimated that the flock that passed him was 240 miles long and 1 mile wide, and that it contained about 2,250,272,000 pigeons. This was a very conservative estimate, to say the least. How, then, could a bird living in such great numbers be exterminated? Certainly not by the destructiveness of natural enemies, because we know that when the birds were most numerous, their natural enemies were most abundant. In fact, many of their natural enemies suffered loss at about the same time the birds did. The Indians killed some of the birds, but only for personal use. The great slaughter came when a market demand for the bird was created by the appearance of the whites. When the white man appeared on this continent, and wherever the pigeons appeared, they were set upon by white men armed with guns, clubs, stones, poles, and nets, which proved to be the most destructive implement. And extinction is certainly possible through human agency. Here is where the museum comes into the story. It is your duty as a good citizen to familiarize yourself with conditions existing in the animal life of your country. I repeat, it is your duty. If you are to take an intelligent part in the lawmaking of your nation, you have heard the brief story of what happened to 2 wild creatures of this land, one a bird and one a mammal. What has happened once may happen again. Do you want to do something practical? It consists in an outlay of 10 cents car fare. This is the American Museum of Natural History, 77th Street in Central Park West. Go to the Hall of North American Mammals, and you will find that a little study of the animal life of this great country of ours is worthwhile. And incidentally, it may be your first lesson in wildlife conservation. Thank you.
WNYC in New York, Dr. John R. Saunders of the educational staff of the Museum of Natural History, speaking on wildlife conservation. This is one of a series of talks presented under the auspices of the Museum of Natural History, one each fortnight during the season. The next of these talks will be 2 weeks from tonight, December the 16th, when Dorothy Bennett, staff assistant of the museum and an aide to Dr. Clyde W. Fisher, the famous astronomer at that museum, speaks on the subject of stars. You can count on a very interesting discussion of the latest news in astrology, the latest news being anywhere from 16 billion light years to the present moment. WNYC in New York, this is Roland Weber announcing, asking you to stand by. They will be ready, Mr. Cowan will be ready in just a moment to carry on the program from the auditorium at Hunter College.
Broadcasting Station of the City of New York, WNYC, again has the privilege of broadcasting from Hunter College, the Adolph Lewis Free Public Lecture Course in Chamber Music. Dr. Fleck has arranged a very interesting program this evening, which will be interpreted by the artist trio, Yasha Fitchburg violinist, Rudolph Sims cellist, and Nicholas Stember piano. The trio danced fantastic on the Hebrew folk theme of Rostovsky's The First Program number. Then the trio of Mendelssohn playing two movements, the Andante and the Scherzo. Then the trio Opus 1, number 3, C minor of Beethoven, playing the Allegro, the Andante, the Menuetto, and the Finale. It will only be a few moments now before Dr. Fleck and the artists enter the auditorium at Hunter College for a continuation of these classic broadcasts from Hunter. Through Dr. Fleck's efforts and Mr. Lewison's high sense of civic benefaction, we are able to bring these chamber music recital programs to the radio audience. Through the medium of them, we hear trios, quartets, quintets, in fact, all the various forms of chamber music. In many instances, the academic compositions of the composers, which after all give us a great insight into the development of the composer's technique. For obvious reasons, in the commercial concert hall, it would be unwise sometimes, if not always, to program some of the works of the masters, because they represent a transitional or development period in the master's technique. When we have the benefit of living in 1931, when most of these things were accomplished from the beginning to the end, we have a great choice. In the early periods of history, of course, they listen to the works as they were created. Today we can choose from the library any opus, number 1, 2, or 3 of that opus that we may see fit to program. Dr. Fleck exercising the most acute judgment to what in his mind is academic and instructive and still of a highly entertaining and musical value, can be relied upon to always do that which will interest us. A very large audience is taking its place now in the auditorium here at Hunter College, and it will only be a few moments when Dr. Fleck himself enters and his genial voice is heard over the radio presenting the first program feature. WNYC from Hunter College. We're waiting just a moment for the audience to take their places. They happen at this time to be filing into the auditorium here at Hunter, and naturally we want perfect order before we go ahead with the recital this evening at Hunter College. Again, for the benefit of those who may have just tuned in, the Adolph Lewis Free Public Lecture Course in Chamber Music will be interpreted by the artist trio this evening, Yasha Fitchburg violinist, Rudolph Sims cellist, and Nicholas Stember piano. Rostovsky, Mendelssohn, and Beethoven are the programmed numbers. And now Dr. Fleck, as you will realize from the applause, is about to address the audience here in Hunter. The artists are taking their place on the program. On the platform, I mean. Dr. Fleck.
Next Wednesday evening, you will have the pleasure of seeing Mr. Lewison, who is going to visit us for the first time this term. I hope you'll all turn out and give him a royal welcome, for if ever a man was entitled to a royal welcome from the people, he is that man. He has had you in mind. He hasn't forgotten you. He has made these concerts possible to you and to hundreds of thousands who listen in over the radio. So come next Wednesday night. Bring your friends and make Mr. Lewison happy with your appreciation of his efforts in your benefit. Now, I had in mind to change the program to start with Beethoven, but we'll not do that. We'll adhere to the program exactly as it stands. The first thing on the program there is a work by Rozovsky.
Now, this Rozovsky, of course, isn't a Puritan. You can understand that. He's a Russian. And he's very clever writer. He was the head of the Music Institute in Palestine. And he was a pupil of Rimsky-Korsakov and of Blastonov, perhaps the two greatest writers, of course, coming after Dvorak, or after Tchaikovsky. Now let us listen to this work by
Rozovsky. It's entitled Trio, Dance Fantastic on a Hebrew folk theme. And it is played by Yasha Fishberg, violin, Rudolph Sims, cello, and Nicholas Stember, piano. First number, Rozovsky. It is a work in one movement, but it has, of course, the other contrasting movements without having been divided into two separate ones. his own. Songs without words. No one has written songs without words such as Mendelssohn has left to the world. And so in this particular one, you have this song without words. Really begins the first theme, and then when the violin takes it up, it becomes a duet. And so it's a duet without words. This thing speaks for itself. It creates the spirit in you, and you follow it so easily and so pleasurably that you are taken immediately with the melodic strains and the lovely harmonies that follow it. It's not like our modern music, which is like everything modern. It's made to order. They have everything. They'll have drill machines next. A man wrote a symphonic poem called it number 231. That's a steam engine, representing a steam engine. Well, why not have the steam engine on the stage? It's far better than to try to stir your imagination with it. I can understand the steam engine on the stage. It has captured my imagination. I know as a boy I used to look at it and wonder. It was a wonderful thing to me. Fired my mind. But to come at it through music is impossible. Pretty soon they'll be using those things. The Central Railroad will be advertising the Century Express from here to Buffalo. We'll play number 999. So that besides looking at the machinery, at the scenery, and you'll have this thing to accompany you on the way, including meals if you can pay for them. Now, let us hear this slow movement. And then comes the scherzo. Well, I'll talk about the scherzo off, because that's another feature that is Mendelssohn's. This slow movement, which is a duet without words.
WNYC, Director of Hunter College. Dr. Fleck will no doubt explain the scherzo, the second movement of the Mendelssohn Trio.
And now we come to the scherzo. In the scherzo, Mendelssohn stands alone. Not even Beethoven, Mozart, or any of the others has excelled in this particular field, because he had that imagination. And then he was a man trained in other ways, a man of high standard of culture, beautiful life. All these things contribute. And so we now enter the world of fairies. You can almost see these little people dancing around. You'll enjoy this immensely. There's nothing more beautiful. And notice how at the last, how the piano plays a series of runs up quickly, and then there are two little pups, and the thing, all these little fairies have disappeared. The whole thing is so daintily and so exquisitely put together. Listen to this exquisite combination, this great scherzo. There's no other scherzo, as I said before, that can be compared to these Mendelssohn scherzos. So I'd like to tell you one thing. Summer before last, when I was in England, I met the great critic and writer what's his name now? Ernest Newman, that's it, Ernest Newman. I'm forgetful. So don't mind that. But we were talking about the Philharmonic Orchestra, which had gone over there through the generosity of that splendid citizen of ours, Clarence. He made this trip possible for them. And Mr. Newman, we were talking about the program, and I said to him, now they had played Wagner and Tchaikovsky and all the other writers. And I said to him, well, now, Newman, which number did you enjoy the most? He said, well, now, he said, you laugh when I tell you. But said, when I heard that thing, under the direction, that scherzo from Midsummer Night's Dream, under the direction of Toscanini, and I've heard it hundreds of times, I never heard anything so beautiful in all my life. Then I realized for the first time Mendelssohn's ideal of how that scherzo should be played. So it captured this hard-hearted, hard-natured man who hears so much he's grown cold and indifferent. But he had a fall for this wonderful performance of Midsummer Night's Dream scherzo. And you know, that is the scherzo that belongs to that wonderful composition of his, the Midsummer Night's Dream, which he wrote at the command of the Emperor, of the King of Germany. And the overture was written when he was only 17 years of age. And that overture was so scored that one wonders where this man got his ideas from and his line of treatment, because even Beethoven and Mozart and Handel followed carefully in the lines of the successors. But this overture is unlike any other overture, and never has there been a writer or one of these fellows that goes around and wants us to rearrange things and improve them. They've never attempted to change or revise a note of that overture. So now listen to this scherzo, which is practically the same as the scherzo in the Midsummer Night's Dream.
Following one musical beauty with another, with possibly of a little deeper significance and magnitude, we come to Beethoven in the program at Hunter College. Dr. Fleck has programmed the trio Opus number 1. Opus 1, rather, number 3, the C minor of Beethoven. The artist trio will play the 4 movements, the Allegro, the Andante, the Menuetto, and the Finale. No doubt Dr. Fleck will lecture on the theme and the intentions of the great master Beethoven in this trio before it is played by the artist. Dr. Fleck.
And now we come to the work of the evening, a trio by Beethoven. Of course, you have heard this trio before. It has been played here quite often. When Beethoven wrote this trio, in fact, it was the first one, it was one of 3 he wrote to his Opus 1. He had been writing other kinds of music. He had never attempted the trio. In fact, at that time, he had been previous to that, very shortly before that, he had been studying with Haydn. Now, no one knows why these two men didn't get along. Of course, Haydn was the older of the two. And somehow or another, they didn't hit it up. But Beethoven then went, after he had been studying for a while with Haydn, and Haydn was rather indifferent, would go on trips, go away somewhere. Of course, that was natural. But he seemed to have been, he hadn't the interest in the man that he had, and yet he admired Beethoven and rather feared him. Then Beethoven went and studied with a genuine pedagogue, German pedagogue. And you know what that means? That means thoroughness from the ground up. You can't get away from it. The German es muss. It must be. You've got to go through it. Take the dose. Many doses of it. Go ahead. Go ahead. They're heartless, but it's a good thing. Sometimes I think we lack that discipline that the German has in music and in everything else. And so we went to this hard-hearted, hard-headed pedagogue. And it wasn't all cakes and ale with them either, because Beethoven didn't quite please this pedagogue. This man teacher would fly into a rage because of the consecutive fifths and the other things that he was forbidden to do, but Beethoven did them anyway. So he studied with this man, and then he finally commenced to write for these three instruments. Now you see, just to give you an idea of what he did, there is still in existence a book filled with exercises, 263 exercises that he did under Albrechtsberger. Now I know that these names will not mean much to you, and still they are impressive even to a person who doesn't understand. And here are the following heads under which these exercises were done, or had to be done. First, there were a number of exercises in imitation. Then in the simple fugue. Then in the fugue chorale, that is the fugue for choral voices. Then in the double fugue. Then in double counterpoint. In the 8th, the 10th, and the 12th. You see, they had numbers at that time. And the triple counterpoint, and triple fugue, and canon. Of course, we are so advanced we don't need those things nowadays. It's foolish to do that. But this man did it. He didn't do it to the satisfaction of his teacher, but he did it nevertheless, and that's the reason he is such a great writer. And so, with this, he started in and he wrote these trios. Now, of the three trios, the third has the one that has made the hit, and it has been a favorite with all players and audiences ever since. When he showed this trio to Haydn, Haydn advised him not to print it. Don't have it published. But Beethoven was a stubborn chap, but he went right ahead and had that thing published. And here it is. Now, it's not hard to understand, because he is still in the formative period of his life as a composer. He hadn't developed. He hadn't become independent like in the second period. And then of Brahms and then Tchaikovsky and the other modern writers. Perhaps it's due to this reason. At the time that Beethoven wrote these trios, the piano had not been in existence as we know the magnificent Steinways of today. It would be an interesting thing to have a Steinway or a Beethoven to play upon. My, how that would have fired his imagination. What he would have left us. What wonderful things he would have left us. But he didn't have them at that time. The violins, of course, were excellent. The best violins come from that period. And the violin gets better as it grows older, providing, of course, it's made by the right maker. And so in Beethoven's works, not having the piano that we have today was a very inferior sort of an instrument. I think I told you before, even in my boyhood days, when I heard Rubinstein play here in New York City, and Gottschalk and those men, they used to have a piano tuner go out in the middle of the concert, and tune the piano on the stage. You see, these fellows banged the thing so much, they used up the piano, that the piano was out of tune in a very short time, but the instrument was very defective. But now with the steel frames, and made as perfectly as they are, the piano is a magnificent instrument and a wonderful possibility. So much so that the temptation of the writer is to elaborate the piano part, and of course these two instruments, these wonderfully, beautiful, expressive instruments, they are not able to keep the pace with the brilliant record that the piano makes. Therefore, there was a lack of balance. There is a lack of balance, as I explained to you before. Now here, that is not the case. And it may be due to the fact that at that time they didn't have those pianos. And yet, in Beethoven's some of his greatest trios, later on, you'll find that same splendid balance. Therefore, to my mind, that is the reason why it seems to me he was a born writer of chamber music. And that is proven by the fact that his quartets are the best. But he maintains the same fine balance of parts. He doesn't invite the piano player to run up and down the piano and sound all sorts of wonderful things that tickle your ear and astonish you. He doesn't do that. And yet, the piano part must be played by an artist. Requires a very fine artist to play it. Now let me call your attention to a few things here. Here are this theme that you hear goes right straight through it. And you hear that it's starting to get a little higher. And then this way. Now, if you heard played that on a piano at that time, it wouldn't sound as well and as long. Now, then this part here is heard in some of his sonatas. And that goes on that way. And there's a second part to that, like this. And so on. Then the next important part is, well, just wait till I find it. Here it is. That's the second part. And then there's another charming little melodic bit like this. And then the piano plays, the violin plays, then the piano. And then later on you'll hear the violins play. That's that first. And the piano plays with brilliant figure. And so that goes on that way. Now you hear